Hi, Julianne. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel here. And I think let's just start with a little introduction of yourself and what you do,
Okay.
your languages, and all that.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here. It's nice to talk with you. I'm Julianne of LINGUIST. I'm on YouTube and Instagram mostly. Um, I have been technically learning Japanese since like 2009 or something insane, but it was like 10 plus years of starting and giving up and trying to start
Mm,
again. Like, so it didn't amount to really anything, right? But there was a desire there. And it was really in 2020 that I started actually making the progress that I wanted to in Japanese. So I've been learning Japanese since like early 2020. And I know a little Spanish and I want to spend more time with Spanish. And I eventually intend to learn some Yiddish as well.
okay. Yeah, it sounds like your Japanese is a bit like my Spanish. Well, at least in the beginning stages, it's hard to like because you're also American and also you grew up mostly monolingual, right?
Yes, hella
Yeah.
monolingual, very monolingual.
Yes, me too. And just becoming bilingual. But yeah, and it's really difficult to learn that first foreign language. And
Yes.
I experienced the same thing with my Spanish. Like I just tried a little bit. I'm like, no, like I don't want this anymore. And you like try it again. I'm like, okay, I can do this now. And then you get frustrated, and it's like, oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then step away. And yeah, I definitely experienced something similar to that with my Spanish, and it was. But you also learned Spanish too. So at what point did you transition from Spanish to Japanese as a focus
So
learning?
it, I Spanish was the language that I was able to learn in junior high and high school. So that was what I was learning in school. I got to like Spanish 5 or something. And at the same time, I was going to a summer language immersion camp for Japanese. I cared about Japanese. I did not care about Spanish. So I was taking Spanish, but Japanese was what I wanted to learn. And I just couldn't really find ways to do it on my own sustainably. So that's why it didn't amount to anything. And then once I didn't have to take Spanish anymore, I didn't take Spanish anymore. But now that I'm older and wiser, I'm like, oh, Spanish is beautiful. Like, Spanish
Yeah.
is wonderful. I wish I hadn't stopped touching Spanish for however many years. So I'm kind of reawakening it now.
Mhm.
But so it was simultaneous, but the desire was always pointed at Japanese.
Yeah, I felt like that too in my Spanish days in high school. I didn't start in high school, but I was forced to learn. It was like you take Spanish. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And sounds like over there too. Are there other languages offered in the high school over there? Or is just Spanish?
Yeah. The choices were Spanish, French, and German. And
Okay.
I I was sort of interested in French, but also there weren't that many teachers in the school,
Oh.
right? So it was like, oh, the French teacher is, bad or crazy or whatever. So like, okay, you don't take French if you can avoid it. So
Crazy
like,
French teacher.
yeah.
Okay.
We did have Chinese
Oh.
for one semester. I took that one semester of Chinese and I loved it. I loved it so much, but then it wasn't offered again. So
Oh.
back to the Spanish grind.
Okay. Well, that's really frustrating too because you started it and then you put in all this work and then it's gone.
Yeah, it was sad. It was sad.
Lost an earbud. But yeah, that would be too because it's like it doesn't go anywhere. Like sure you get the
Yeah.
credit, but then all of that progress, like you have to start from the beginning with
Yeah.
another language.
What about you? What was offered in your school?
Spanish.
Just Spanish?
Spanish for Spanish learners, Spanish
Okay.
for Spanish speakers, Spanish for Spanish, and Spanish and all Spanish.
Okay.
Yes. And eventually they did offer French at that school that I was going. It was a brand new high school,
Mm.
no, but mostly just Spanish. Some of the other high schools had French or German, but that was it. And those weren't my high school. So
Right.
at the time, yeah. And so it was just Spanish and Honestly, I hated Spanish in high school, and I hated it. Like
That's how I
was
felt most
18,
of
I
the
hated it
time.
so much. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
crazy because now I love it so much, and but it was also because there is so much Spanish in the community over here, and because I grew up around so many Spanish speakers, and I think there was a lot of frustration on my end, not understanding, and then instead of being like, oh, I want to learn, I was a kid and I was dumb and I was like, oh, I don't instead of taking advantage of the opportunity to learn.
I mean, anytime that you're being forced to do something, it kind of takes the fun out of it.
It's
I mean,
true.
some people can make it work and find the fun, but I know that when I was a teenager, I was like, you can't make me do anything.
I can see that. I was the same way. So I recognize the spirit, the angsty spirit.
Yep.
Yeah, I definitely had that. Also, my dad's girlfriend is, and still, they've been together for like 15 years, is Mexican and mostly speaks Spanish. Which now it's like, hey, like I get together with her and talk, and like, I learn from her and we do other things and like learn different cooking and stuff. Like she makes amazing Mexican food, and I'm taking advantage of all these things now. But at the time, it was just like Spanish. Like you came in and you replaced my mom, and now I don't like Spanish because you speak Spanish.
Yep, yep.
So there were a lot of other factors in
Yeah.
there that the language is not responsible for my emotions towards Spanish, and the people who speak Spanish are like they are not responsible for it either. It was just my personal situation.
It's a personal problem.
Yeah, we have a lot of personal problems. But yeah, it definitely made it challenging to learn Spanish. And then at some point, I don't really know what I couldn't really tell you, I guess, where the shift. No, the shift was in Italy. The shift was in Italy when I had to.
Italy?
Yes, it happened in Italy. It happened one summer in Italy when I realized that I couldn't when I couldn't communicate with anyone because I didn't speak Italian, and I was like, this really sucks being in a country and not being able to like say anything or like communicate, express my ideas. And then I started thinking, all these people who come over here, they're experiencing something similar. This was like 18-year-old, 19-year-old me. Like, they're experiencing something similar to this. Maybe I should have a little bit more empathy here and understand, what they're going through. And it changed my perspective around Spanish.
That's really cool. That's cool.
Yeah. So for your, I guess mostly Japanese.
Yes.
So what is that? What does your process for Japanese look like right now? Your study process, your level within Japanese.
Sure. So level is hard for me to gauge because I do mostly immersion learning techniques. So like the typical JLPT levels aren't super helpful because I'm not learning like that grammar and vocabulary in that order. I'm learning it as it comes up. And in real content, like you're going to run into advanced stuff, you're going to run into basic stuff, you're going to run into intermediate stuff. Like it's all mushed together. Like natives don't have those delineations that learners would, right? So I'd say I'm somewhere, if because I have looked at some JLPT textbooks sometimes, I'm probably like, I'm somewhere solidly intermediate and I'm somewhere like at the end of N3 / in the beginning of N2. I know that might not mean anything to you, but if anybody listening is into Japanese stuff, you probably know what I mean. Yeah, they know what I'm talking about. So just like intermediate. I'm probably not like at the early stages of intermediate anymore, but I'm certainly not comfortable saying that I'm advanced. I would not say that. So yeah, my process is mostly immersion learning techniques. So I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of reading. I do my best to watch and listen to as much stuff as makes sense in a given day. I'm not somebody who watches a lot of TV in general, so that it's harder to make myself, watch stuff, whereas reading, it's pretty easy to make myself do. So yeah, I'm just kind of learning vocabulary and grammar through what I'm reading. So, I mean, I look stuff up. I'm not just like guessing what a word is and like learning it like a child would. I'm looking things up and taking note of things and making Anki cards, that kind of stuff. I do some textbook stuff because I love grammar. I love to read about grammar. So I sometimes do some textbook stuff on the side, but I don't have like a study plan. I don't have an idea of like, I'm going to finish X textbook by X time or anything like that. And every like week or two, I do an italki lesson in Japanese. So it's like half conversation, then half like reading something together, going over something I've written, that kind of stuff. And that's basically my process.
It's a nice balance of all of the different abilities and different skills. And I think that is interesting too with the immersion approach, because I feel like that's something that I've been lacking. And I had it with my Spanish. Like I had immersion in the country in Spanish in Spain and in Costa Rica, but for a very short time, for 4 weeks in each one. But it was but then here I haven't had that so much. It was really not enjoy. Like I learned Spanish, but I was like, you're gonna do this. Like I told myself, I was like, you're gonna do this. I'm like I was my own worst boss. I was like, you're gonna do this. You can't learn this. But it wasn't fun, and it wasn't. It wasn't great. And I feel like now, especially, I'm seeing a lot more of this immersion, like what you're creating. And you even have like you're creating it for other people, like with your mini immersion weekends and all of that. And it's really nice, and it's very similar to like native language learning for kids. Like you mentioned, it's like kind of like what they do, but we're different because we have that perspective of the of everything else that we've learned already.
Yeah.
And our skills in our native language and the ability to learn more quickly. And
we're able to shortcut some stuff that maybe would have taken longer if we were just being like a baby in your new language.
That's true. And how long have you been studying Japanese?
Studying in a sustainable way that's actually been making progress. It's been, I guess, technically, what year? It's 2022, right? Yes. Okay. It's been 2 years of actually finding this balance, finding what works for me, not putting all these weird expectations of myself of how I should be spending my time. Before that, it was like 13 years of like trying and being really hard on myself and the all or nothing thinking was my problem. So like I was very intense for like a few months, and then I would burn myself out and I would take like a 3-year break or whatever and just feel bad about myself. So 2 years of intentional study probably is what I would count.
Isn't it crazy how much you can achieve in that intentional study time? And then you like look at that and you're like, wait, I spent 13 years doing this, and I spent 3 years and I made all this.
I was like the babyest beginner for like 13 years, and I just I kept hitting this wall, right? And I couldn't get past it. But after I started adjusting to myself and caring about myself and my feelings in making those adjustments and trying new things and everything, like the amount of progress I've made has been crazy. Like I can just like read a Japanese book if I want to. I mean, nothing super complicated, don't get me wrong, but like I can just read a Japanese book, which I never thought would really be possible.
Yeah, it really does make a difference. And it's honestly something I'm working on. I'm working on right now, just like more immersion-based learning, because I did immerse myself in a way with my Spanish to get to this level, but I did it through a Spanish bachelor's degree program online where I just had to be constantly reading, writing, and speaking, listening in Spanish, but it was all instruction, like, okay, you have to do this, you have to read this, you have to do this. There's a lot of deadlines, and I was forced to learn quickly. And in a very short time, my Spanish was like, because I was constantly in, just in a situation that required it. But
honestly, finding stuff to immerse in that you like actually really care about is such a joy. Like it is so much fun. What kind of books do you like? I'm reading a Spanish book that's really good.
No, I read Cien Años de Soledad for my first Spanish novel.
What is, can you say it slower?
Cien Años de Soledad, 100 Years of
Yes, yes,
Solitude.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Very poor choice for my first novel. Excellent book. But the reason it was a poor choice, because I did it with a tutor. It took me a little over a year to read. And
That's a big one.
chapter by chapter, I went through, and I have that book still. I looked up every single word in that book that I didn't know. I translated it. I wrote in it. Like every paragraph, every other paragraph, I wrote notes like, this is what I understand.
Wow.
It wasn't really fun, but I did it and it
Yeah.
helped. And then I met with my tutor and we discussed it and we like write about it, and it was, I think I
Yeah.
wrote much like every chapter I wrote something about like what I
That's
understood.
wild.
But
I really have had to like find a balance between intensive reading and extensive reading. I mean, when
yeah.
I do intensive reading, I never do like translating really. I feel like that would take up so much brain
Hmm.
power when you're already, using a lot of brain power trying to read in your target language. So I personally, I don't have a reason to, right? Because I don't have a project that I'm doing with anybody. So some books I'll read intensively where I'm, looking up every word I don't know and writing my notes. Some of them I read extensively where I mostly don't look stuff up, or I
Yeah.
just like, my extensive is probably a little more intensive than other people's extensive reading, where like I'll look up words or whatever and I'll save sentences that I might want to put in Anki, but I'm mostly not like writing notes or anything. So I think finding a balance of those two is really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, that was something I had to learn because I realized I was like, because it became just like, and I had other books that I wanted to read in Spanish, and I was just like, I don't want to read these. Like, I don't want to go through that again. I don't want to like. So I had to. But my classes, my Spanish degree, forced me out of that because it wasn't possible to go into that
Right.
depth with
Yeah. With a
multiple
deadline.
classes. Yeah, it was like, so it forced me to really improve my fluency because I no longer could say, okay, this means this, and like
Yep.
get into all those details. I had to just read, take the context and apply it and go. So it forced me into somewhat of a balance between those. But
That's awesome.
um, currently, I don't have any of my own practice for Spanish. I'm just doing my classes. I'm finishing them in the May, June, somewhere around there, and then it's done. And although I will be, that's part of the reason that I'm so excited to have like conversation sessions within the Linguist Dojo, is because that is going to be somewhat of my own practice to lead those.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, I'm looking for different ways I can integrate my work into my own language practice. So
That's awesome.
but right now not much exists for my. I have been taking French classes in Spanish,
Oh, very
so
cool.
that does help. But
I mean,
it's,
it's hard to fit
yeah.
in extra stuff when you're
Mhm.
doing coursework, I
Yeah.
feel like, I don't know. It takes a lot of effort just to keep up with that, so it's
Yeah,
hard.
it's a challenge there, and I guess you know what, I do have decent. And then like I said, my dad's girlfriend speaks Spanish, and she's very close by. So I have like speaking practice, but I don't
Yeah.
have. But that's it. It's like maintenance Spanish, basically.
Mm,
And yeah, and it's mostly my schedule's determined by those classes that I'm taking, which are not like Spanish classes to learn the language. They are learning through the language. So like
got
I'm
it.
learning about Spanish and Portuguese history and Latin American history, and well, that's what I'm learning right now. It through Spanish.
That's
Yeah.
really cool. That's
So it's pretty
immersive.
different. It is. It is
That
immersive.
counts.
Yeah. And a bit easier to read those kind of texts because they're textbooks. And whereas reading a story, reading a book, like you asked, like what kind of books, I don't know. That's an area I'd like to like it's a step back, but I'd like to move. I feel like I jumped too quickly into advanced literature, and
Mm,
it's a good practice, definitely, to do like with short stories, maybe go through and do like
yeah,
really intensive
definitely.
reading, but not so great to do with that. And ooh, very frustrating.
Yeah.
Are you reading in Spanish right now? Is that what you're asking?
A little,
Yeah.
a little bit. I started in August, and I've been kind of paused to do Japanese stuff. So it's like I'm very barely reading it, but oh man, I have it, but it's under some books.
Oh, that's okay.
If you like kind of weird, unsettling books at all, I don't know. That might just be my taste, but there's a book called Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin, and it's only it's like a novella, like it's quite short and it's written quite clearly. That might be, I mean, it's very like you're drawn in very quickly, and you just kind of read it quite quickly, so it might be a good option. It's less intensely literary. I can't remember the Spanish title. I'm remembering it now. It's like Distancia de Rescate.
Okay.
I think.
Or
something like
we
that.
can check.
Yeah, maybe it's not your thing, but it's my thing.
Yeah, I like books that make me question everything, that make me rethink my existence. I like those kind of books.
You might like this one.
Like whenever I read any stories from like Borges or and then it's like, wait, what? Let me rewire.
Yeah. I love that kind of thing.
And yeah, that feeling of like, maybe everything I thought I knew doesn't actually make any sense at all.
That's the best experience. And having that experience in your target language, like you're already in a different world, right? Because your head's in a different language, and to have just an extra layer of craziness.
Yeah, and actually something that I do when I read those, because I did take it's sort of it was, I guess, a capstone course for the Spanish degree, and we had to read quite a bit of literature like that, and something that I started doing with some of those stories, like especially the stories from Borges, is like reading them in Spanish, and then reading them in English, and then reading them in Spanish, if they exist that way, because I needed to speed up my process without having to look up all the words.
Yeah, I have both versions of my book as well.
Oh, it's really nice, huh? Because it's like, it's really interesting to look at how things are translated.
I was gonna say the same thing if you were not gonna say that, because like I've been involved in the book world in the past, and so like translation is something that's super interesting to me. I don't intend to like do it because I don't know. I think translators are artists. Like they're amazing. So like, it's always so interesting to see how things are translated, expressed differently in each language, localized sometimes to make something colloquial make any amount of sense, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it really is. And there's different translations too. You look at one person's translation, another person's translation.
Yeah, they're all different.
Yeah, they're interpretations of that language.
Yeah.
And okay, before I go off onto a tangent about how we interpret language, because that could last for hours, let's wrap up this video and then we'll hop on over to Instagram. So you guys watching this, we will have a replay by the time you're seeing this here of our Instagram conversation that you can hop on over to and catch the rest of our conversation. And yeah, let me go on over to Instagram.
You over there.
And down below in the description is a link to Julianne's YouTube channel. So you guys can go on over there too, and then over to Instagram. All right, bye guys. See you in a few over on Instagram.